Alright, just a quick build video for you guys. This is what I've been doing lately, and I'll show you a few things. Basically, it's built off a previous build video, but I've made a few changes and they're pretty significant. First off, you'll notice I'm a high elf now. I race changed from Nord. The reason I did that was for the sheer amount of damage that this thing puts out and the stamina regeneration, and I'll explain that in a minute. Going to your high elf passive abilities, you have spell recharge. When you activate a class ability, what that means is any abilities here, dark magic, daedric summoning, storm calling, any of those will cause this to proc, and this will give you 640 magicka or stamina based on whichever is lowest. But in my case, of course, being a magicka sorcerer, it's stamina, and this effect can occur once every 6 seconds. This really amounts to quite a bit of stamina, so it's really opened up that area for me. This increases my max magicka, which also increases your damage as well, as you guys probably know. And elemental talent increased my spell damage by 258. That's a pretty significant bump to spell damage. So that's why I went high elf. Just getting into the build, a lot of people will, and good players as well, will put something that will give them the max damage, but I don't necessarily do that. There's a couple reasons why. I like survivability, and with this I'm able to basically kite groups of players, kill lots of people without running out of magicka, and I do have a certain amount of spell resistance as well. So I'll kind of run through everything. Everything here is tri-stat glyphed and impenetrable. This is important because of your critical resistance. You want that to be at least right around 3000. That's pretty important to have. So this gives you max health, magicka, and stamina. I've got one medium, one heavy, everything else is light. This is the necropotent set. It gives you a lot of magicka to play with, and this is active as long as you have a pet. Now the pet on a sorcerer actually does a lot of good, so I'll show you guys that in a minute. But anyway, one medium, one heavy, 5 light, everything impenned, everything's tri-stat glyphed. Now getting to the jewelry, I've got the necklace of the Lich, and it is in the protective trait. I had to transmute this into the protective trait and the jewelry as well. Now this is good for getting, basically it gives you the same as major resolve and major ward, which is really good to have. On my front bar, I've got the Staff of Willpower. Now if you can get a Master Staff from Dragonstar Arena, that would be ideal here. I just use this here because I don't have the Master Staff yet, but this works in the sense that it gives you an additional 1451 max magicka, which is always helpful for a sorcerer. So I've used that. It is a flame staff, which is infused. Now infused will probably put out the most pressure and deal the most damage. As you can see, we've got 41 shock damage, so that's really helpful. Now the reason you want a flame staff is if you get into the destruction staff passives. Okay, with a flame staff, it increases your damage done on single target abilities by 8%. So what this means is all these skills here, your damage done is going to be raised by 8%. So that's really important to have. Now, on my back bar I have the restoration staff of the Lich. Now of course on my front bar it's not active. When I go to my back bar, of course it's active, and I've got it in the infused trait. Now one of the reasons I do this is because infuse increases your glyph damage, and here I have a weapon damage and a spell damage. Well, I tap them with this first, and all of a sudden it raises up my weapon and spell damage. And I'll go ahead and demonstrate here what this does. Now as you can see, I'll just go to my crystal fragment. My crystal fragment tooltip is 15314. Okay. Now watch when I tap them with the restoration staff. Remember, this is glyphed with a weapon and spell damage. And now it's gone up to 16,696, about 16.7. So that's one of the reasons I have that there. The other reason is your heavy attacks with a restoration staff will give you more magicka back. And I believe somewhere in here, okay, you get major mending after a fully charged restoration, and you also heal yourself or a nearby ally for 30% of the damage inflicted by the final hit of a fully charged heavy attack. Increases healing by 15% on allies under 3% health, and your fully charged heavy attacks restore 30% more magicka. So if you are looking to restore magicka, hitting him with a fully charged restoration attack will do the job for you. Now, let's see. These guys don't really look like they need any help. Alright. So, let's just say I am getting low. And what I'm going to do is now I've I should have kind of explained what I was doing before I started. Just kind of bear with me here. I guess I kind of made a bad, picked a bad spot for doing a video. Now you can see my magic recovery here is up to 3,300. This lasts, when I go to the back bar, when I get underneath 30%, 33% magicka, and then I go ahead and use a magicka skill, it procs this, and this will give me roughly, depends on which bar I'm on, 33, 3,500 magic restoration back. Now it says it's only for 1032, but it's actually more than that. Normally my magicka recovery is right around 1598, which is okay. You can make do with it, but this really helps you out a lot, especially in longer, more drawn out fights, especially if you're against a group of players or that sort of thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys again how this works. Now you can see 1598 with a potion. I'm up to 1820. Now I'm up to 3,500 magic recovery and 3,300. So this really amounts to quite a bit, which is why I use the Lich set. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have it on both bars all the time. Just keep it on your back bar, and when you feel like you're getting low, go ahead and activate that by using a skill while you're under 33%. So I guess that's basically it. You can see my physical and spell resistance is pretty far up there now. Switching from Nord, I did lose a lot of physical and spell resistance because Nord gives you like an extra 4,000, and Nord is actually a really easy character to play, but ever since I went high elf, I've just pretty much been destroying everybody. It's really given me a lot more damage, and it feels like I'm shooting fish in a barrel. Another thing to point out is when this activates, I get another 6450 in terms of resistance. So you tack that onto 23,500. Basically, you're looking at about 30,000 resistance, and if you're in a heavy fight, basically this is going to stay procced up just about all the time. Well, I won't say all the time, but it does quite a bit, and it gives you a lot of ultimate back. So that's really important. I'll just kind of go through my skills as well. This is the ultimate I use most of the time, and it's a really handy ultimate. Once it lands, it does a lot of AoE damage, and then it deals shock damage to my enemies every 1 second, and that's about 4,000 per second. So you know, it's really good to have. This is one of my favorite ultimates in the game. It can be a lifesaver in a fight. Now I use Flame Reach as my CC and kind of my spammable. Now, right now it costs. It's kind of expensive to use. It costs 3,200 in magicka. Now, if I had the master staff, of course, you know, it'd go down to about 2,200. It does a pretty good bit of damage, and it's kind of hard to fight against. just because, you know, that CC is always there and it's always knocking them back, and they're just constantly having to work past that. Hunting Curse, really good skill. This isn't a spammable, it's a fire and forget. Basically, what it does is it curses the enemy, and then it does a little bit of initial damage, and then, but the big damage comes 3.5 seconds later, and then it hits him again after that. So typically, I really like to use this as a background. This is the way to burst enemies down, because this is fire and forget, and it'll pretty much whittle down their health. I like to use this on Nightblades because it exposes Nightblades. But basically, any player that has this on them, they're going to have to deal with this. So it's a real important skill to have. This is crystal fragments, and this is when this procs. And I'll show you here in a minute. When this procs, the damage is raised 20% more, and the magicka cost is 50% less. So let's see if I can get this thing to proc. Oh, once again, for those of you not familiar with the game, this is what I like to use potion-wise. If you're not dealing with a Nightblade, typically I like to run this Essence of Spell Power. This gives me extra spell damage by 20%. It grants you Major Prophecy, which gives you spell critical rating by 40. What this does is it actually gives you about 10%. So just looking at it, my spell critical is sitting at 29%. If I do a dark deal, which is under the dark magic section, my spell critical goes all the way up to 35%. If I pop a spell power potion, that goes all the way up to 45%. And at that point, you're really doing a lot of damage, because the critical hit is 1.5 times the normal damage, in addition to whatever else you might have in the champion points. And this will get you a lot of kills. So, and your spell power will give you a little bit more in terms of damage done as well. Now just remember, this is the morph to have. This is the one you want. It is under the dark magic ability, crystal fragments, crystal shard morph. This is the one you want, ideally. So just keep that in mind. Now, the way this is going to work is when you when you're using an ability against the enemy, you're gonna get a little sound notification, and you're gonna get these crystals around your hands. Now I'm gonna go ahead and show you that. See that? So basically that's how that works. Okay, getting into the pets. A lot of people, they don't really quite think the pet is that useful on a sorcerer, but it actually is. It it does a lot of shock damage, as you can see, and it's got a kick which deals, 5,700 shock damage as well. So this is actually good to have by your side in terms of whatever you're fighting. So if you have this and your ultimate here going at the same time, it can really raise up your DPS. And your ultimate is basically fed by the Bloodspawn set. You'll get a lot of ultimate back, so you can basically kind of keep this going. This is Hardened Ward. I keep this on my front bar just so it's handy. I'm able to hit it, and as I'm taking damage or whatever. And I can also, if I get too low in health, I can hit my Summon Twilight, which will heal me for 8630. And this can actually crit as well, so 45% of the time if I'm doing it right. I can get a crit off that, which will be, I don't know, what does this work out to, like another 13,000 plus the 19% in my health and my champion points, so it does quite a bit. Now going to the back bar, this is more or less my setup bar. Of course I have a Twilight here, which I really don't use that much on the back bar, but for a Sorcerer you need to have that pad active, you have to have it on both bars. I have Streak. This does a lot of shock damage, and basically I can charge forward, and in that distance all the enemies are going to be stunned. But keep in mind, if you cast it again in 4 seconds, it's going to cost 50% more, so I wouldn't typically cast this more than 2 or 3 times. If you're getting near to finishing an enemy off, you can cast it more, as you're probably not going to run out of magicka or anything like that. This is Bound the Storm. By activating this, it gives me Major Resolve, Major Ward, increases my physical and spell resistance by 50 to 80. If you look here, my physical and spell resistance are sitting right at about 1800. So as of now, having cast Boundless Storm, I'm sitting at right at around 23,500. You're not a tank or anything, but that's a very respectable number, and that's made possible by the protective ring set. And you get about 30,000 when this is activated. And in a big fight, this is going to stay activated quite a bit. So you have that. Now here I have Dark Conversion, and this restores 80-90 health and 3,600 magicka instantly, and an additional 2,400 over 20 seconds. This is basically a stamina to magicka ability. That's when you see me doing this. That's converting my stamina into magicka. And that also, since it is a dark deal, since it is a dark magic ability, it gives me that extra spell critical. So typically when I'm in a fight, I like to keep this going. If I'm at a point where I want to keep my magicka up or something like that. That's what I do. You don't want to. Typically, you don't want to wait till you get down too far. You know, if you're in a fight, it's a really good idea to keep your magicka up. So that's what I do there. And I've also got dampen magic. Now this is kind of an expensive skill, magic-wise, to use. But typically, when I go into a fight, I'll do this once and shield stack along with hardened ward. What this does, it gives me roughly about 20,000 in terms of shield strength. Now, for the ultimate, I've got Light's Champion, and it gives you major force for 8 seconds and increases their critical damage by 15%. This is a really good skill to have when you get into trouble, and since you do generate a lot of ultimate pretty quickly, this is usually available to you. So that's what I use typically, and just getting into the potions a little bit. I haven't really gotten into this. You've got the essence of movability. This is handy for. This is a handy potion set to have. Typically, I keep these around for Nightblades, so they can't disappear on me. I've also got the essence of detection, and this and this basically kind of do the same thing, except this one gives me major sorcery, granting me added spell damage, as well as magicka recovery. This will give you CC immunity for a little while. But like if there's a Nightblade, or I think there might be a Nightblade, just pop these. Works pretty well. I also like to keep one of these handy, the essence of invisibility. Sometimes this can be really helpful. It grants you major expedition and increases your movement speed by 30% for 15 seconds. Now you don't want to sprint or anything while you're on this stuff, otherwise you'll come out of invisibility, but sometimes you can pop this and it's a good way to get away, so just keep that in mind. See what else. Champion points. I'm going to start here. I'm not saying these are the best, but this is what I've used. I've got Siphoner, 4 points into that. Just, you know, it's something there. If you have this on them, you know, it's just that much more they have to purify off themselves, and it kind of sets off the alarm bells, making them purify that. I've got Warlord, reduce the cost of break free by 24%. I've got a lot there. I find that having Warlord is really helpful. Now I've got a lot into stamina recovery, and I'll explain this a little bit. My stamina recovery edition is 14%, as well as my magicka recovery. Now this is augmented by the stamina recovery glyph that I have on the jewelry. Now it looks kind of counterproductive. On these two I have spell damage. Here I have stamina recovery instead of magicka recovery. And there's a couple ways to play it, but having a high stamina pool, that along with the
There is power in places mortals find
spell
unfamiliar.
recharge passive,
Take your groveling elsewhere.
this has
so
pretty
live
much
quietly.
kept me from getting my stamina run out. Very good school to have, or it's a very good setup, and it also feeds your dark deal ability. So if you're dark dealing and you have a good stamina pool, of course you're going to have a good magicka recovery as well, and this gives you a lot. So that's that setup. Reduce the cost of roll dodge by 12%. So I find being able to roll dodge out of certain situations really helps me out, and so I've put points here. Now here's where it gets kind of critical, and I've tested this, so this is probably the best that I've come up with. I've got 14% into Elemental Expert, increased my Flame Shock magic damage. I've got 72 into Spell Erosion, and I've got 51 into Elfborn. Now this increases my critical damage and critical healing with magical abilities by 19%. So this will heal you as well as do more damage, especially with the critical hits. So that's important to have. I've got 72 into Master at Arms. This is really important. Scales really well. This will complement this, and anyway, this is probably the best setup that I've had. Now here, I put points where I've thought I've needed them. You can kind of play around with this, but I've got 56 in Ironclad. This reduces the damage I take by 20%. Now I put some points into Spell Shield, and I've got some points into Light Armor Focus. Now what I've done is kind of balance these out so that I have an equal amount of physical and spell resistance. I've also got critical resistance, 52 into that, 43 into Elemental Defender, 43 into Hardy, and I've got a certain amount into Bastion. This will increase my shields as well. Let's see what else. I guess that's about it as far as the champion points. I've had a pretty good run with this build. No, the Nordic Juggernaut, that's a really good build as well. The only problem that I've had there was as you go into Imperial City, you'll run into groups of people or that sort of thing, and
why must we wait? I haven't killed something in hours.
you're not likely to
We've not found them all.
you're not likely to get ganked or anything with that armor setup. But with that said, you know you've got the whole telvar issue. You know, you always have to carry 10,000 telvars in order to run it, and of course it loses its power if you don't have that amount of telvars on you. Well, if you go out and you run into a Zerg and You know, like there's 20 people on you killing you all at once, you know, you're going to lose, you know, half of that. So then you got to go back to the bank and get more and that sort of thing. So that becomes an issue. So for me running this build, I don't really have that as a problem. Just something to consider when you're out there. I can just, you know, do the PvP and not have to run into that.
Pleasure than corrupting a neighboring shrine.
One other thing I'm going to add that I've kind of forgot is if you learn to use the streak ability and streak through your enemies and then hit them on the other side, this really disorients them, and it'll stun them for 3 seconds as well. So this is probably one of the best CCs in the game. I guess maybe second to this, but this really gets them. If you're using this right, you're going to be really hard to beat. So
Why the Dark Lord wants this pitiful city is beyond me.
I guess that's about it. That's what I've been using, and I really like the magicka regen and the stamina regen I have on this. Ever since I've had this set up, I haven't run into any stamina regeneration issues, and that's been really good. So anyway, I guess that's about it. I hope some of you have found this helpful, and it'll show you what I'm doing anyway, and why I'm doing it. So you can use this to incorporate into your own builds and that sort of thing. But anyway, I guess that's about it for the video, and I'll see you guys out there. Take care.